Hello everybody, it's Tim here again, here another movie review, this time finally for a review for Abigail, directed by Radio Silence, who did Ready or Not and Scream 5 and 6. Now, Ready or Not I thought was great. I actually think it's their best film. Scream 5 I thought was a good film. I'd give it like a 3 out of 4. Ready or Not, I obviously would give it a 4 out of 4. Scream 6 I actually really liked. I liked it better than Scream 5. I'd give it like a 3.5 out of 4. I thought it was actually really good, Scream 6. Melissa Barrera was in Scream 5 and 6, and she was also in this movie. I actually think her performance in this movie was better than her performance in Scream 5 and 6. I'll just go ahead and say it. This movie right here, this is an interesting one. Abigail here, if you've seen the previews, you pretty much got the movie spoiled, how it's about like a vampire ballerina girl or whatever. And she gets kidnapped by these criminals because supposedly they're going to like hold her for ransom, and her father is this like rich crime boss who they think's going to pay like multiple millions of dollars, and they're going to divide it up between the team. And the twist is eventually is that they find out she's actually a monster, a vampire, pretty much. And really, in the movie, she really could have been like any monster because for a chunk of the movie, when the characters are getting killed off, she really kind of comes off like she could just be like any ghoul, really, the way they're playing it. And it's not until later where they actually point out like, no, she's a vampire, and then they start showing like more actual vampire traits and start showing that she's more or less is a vampire. Really, is what I'm trying to say. And before that, for the first like half of the movie, they really treated it as just like kind of a caper, like heist type story and movie. And it works well as that, and I like how it starts out like that. Kind of similar to like From Dusk Till Dawn, where it's kind of like a crime heist movie, and then it's like a twist where it actually becomes like a vampire monster movie. I like that aspect. But if you're someone who's watching this movie and you don't know what it is, you might be bored by it if you don't know what it is, and then it just switches over. Unless you're someone who's like just curious and who's like in the film and actually does finish what you start, like me, and then you get like into the movie and you do want to finish it. And it is a good movie. I'll go ahead and say it. Like throughout this movie, towards the middle, I was having a great time with this movie. This movie is extremely funny. Like especially in like the middle chunk of it, I was having a great time with it. And I will also say overall, this is not a great movie as a whole. By the end, the biggest weakness of this movie is the final. It starts to collapse in on itself. By the middle, I was having a great fun time. The little girl in this movie plays Abigail, does a great job. The cast of characters in this, like all the criminals or whatever, they all do like a really good job. Like I said, Melissa Barrera does a great job in this. Is like pretty much who becomes like the final girl who gets away at the end. Dan Stevens is great in this. He's hilarious with all his lines. And Kevin Durant also does a great job in this. I believe the actress's name is Catherine Newton, who is in, I believe she was in that new movie Lisa Frankenstein as well, which I didn't like, but she was fine in it. She was in Detective Pikachu as well. She was good in that. But she's a good actress. She's good in this as well. And of course, one by one, the characters start to get killed off. And there's like this dude in it who plays like this airhead guy who keeps saying like real stupid stuff. And he's obviously the first to go. And I like how the Abigail character, who's like she's acting like this little girl or whatever, and who's like really scared and all that. And of course, you find out when she's like a monster and she's manipulating them all, and including Melissa Barrera. And the movie tries to have like twist after twist. That does start to hurt it. It tries to have like layer upon layer of twists. The first twist they like try to throw you away is that this was all a setup, and that they were all set up to be there because they were all like enemies of her father, who is like this rich vampire or whatever, named like Alistair or whatever. You honestly didn't. That's not so bad, but you honestly didn't need that. It would have been fine if all these people were just criminals who just like kidnapped this little girl just for money because her father was a rich crime boss, and he did just happen to be a vampire. You didn't really need this whole like twist story of them like connected to her father's like criminal empire or whatever. You didn't really need to do that. The other twist they try to throw in there or whatever is that like towards the end or whatever, like that just randomly comes out of nowhere at like the last second in the final, is like the black dude or whatever who supposedly hired him, that was actually working for Abigail, like actually hates Abigail and actually wants to like turn Dan Stevens at like the last second into a vampire so they can like team up and kill Abigail, like, and kill her father and like take over the empire for themselves. This comes out of friggin' nowhere at literally the last second in the movie. And this is when the movie like totally changes gears randomly, and it makes like no sense. because it just comes out of nowhere and feels like so forced in. And this is when it really hurts the movie, because before this I was having like a great time with the movie. It was like a 4-star film up until this point, and this is what really hurts the movie, because it just feels like so forced, like really extremely thrown in and just like fast tracked. It really felt like they put this in here because they just didn't really want to kill the Abigail character at the end, which is logically what you would really have to do because of the way the movie's set up, because you would have to have like one survivor, and you would probably, in doing so, you'd have to have somebody like stake the vampire Abigail character. And, you know, it'd either have to be like Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, or both of them get away at the end, one or the other or whatever, and they would have to stake Abigail at the end and get away. It'd have to be something like that. And so it felt like they just, you know, they felt like the Abigail character, or the little girl or whatever, was just too charming in the role, and they just didn't want to kill her, so they had to like just do some kind of twist at the end just to throw it in, even though it really didn't make much sense, just to throw it in, just to make Dan Stevens become the main villain at the end, just out of the blue, and he just like goes crazy, mad with power. He's a little bit of an asshole in the movie, but he just like goes completely insane at the end when he turns into a vampire, and he's just like stakes the black dude, and then he's like, now I'm gonna kill you, Melissa Barrera, and then I'm gonna like murder your son. It like doesn't make any sense at all, because he's just like he is fun in the role when he becomes the villain, but he's like extremely villainous, like way like over the top psychotic, and he was like never like that throughout the entire movie at all. It would have made, like, Catherine Newton's character, I believe that's the actress's name, the one that was in Detective Pikachu, like her character does get bit in the movie, and she ends up getting killed by sunlight. And she gets like puppeted by Abigail to like kill Kevin Durant's character, like she gets mind controlled. It would have made more sense if like Dan Stevens' character would have been the one that got bit, and it wasn't Catherine Newton's character. Like if he would have gotten bit in the movie earlier, like it would have been him that got bit at that point, and throughout the movie we would have seen him like gradually change, and the other like characters wouldn't have known that he was like going crazier and crazier, and then by the end of the movie he like fully transformed, and he decided to just like, you know, by then he just went like mad with power or whatever by the end, because that would have made more sense. And then he decided to like take over and then kill Abigail. Then it would have made more sense with Melissa Barrera like teaming up with Abigail, because then Abigail's like, if you I can't defeat him obviously because he's, you know, older and more powerful, so if you help me, you know, defeat Dan Stevens, Melissa Barrera, I'll let you go. You can go back to your son. So that's basically what they do. They team up, take out Dan Stevens, and Dan Stevens has some really hilarious lines, I'll admit. That's the one thing, even though this third act, final or whatever, climax is extremely clumsy, the fun of the movie that making me laugh and entertaining me with the actors' charisma on screen, with the little girls playing Abigail and Melissa Barrera's performance, and just Dan Stevens in general and his charisma on screen, making me laugh and entertaining me, did give me points, and it gave me a good time. And they end up staking Dan Stevens, and he tries to like mind control Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens does, and then it doesn't work, and they get him down on the ground, and Abigail and Melissa Barrera get ready to stake him, and they're like, one thing about being a vampire, Abigail tells him that she's like, one thing about being a vampire is like it takes a long time to learn how to do all the cool shit, and then she just takes him, and he's like, oh fuck, and blows up. That was pretty funny. And of course the dude shows up who's her father, and he gets ready to like kill Melissa Barrera, and Abigail's like, no, don't, and he's like, I'm sorry I wasn't here. He's like, he's like an absentee father, you know, he's never there for his daughter. And almost said Abigail, but Melissa Barrera gets to leave, of course, because she helped Abigail. She gets to leave. She goes out to the vehicle. She jerks out a piece of candy. She puts it in her mouth, and she's like pretty much contemplating all the crazy ass events of everything that happened. And she's just like, and you know, pretty much ends just kind of similar to like Ready or Not. Really, this movie feels like really like a spiritual companion piece to Ready or Not. Not as good as Ready or Not, because the script is not as tight as Ready or Not, because this third act, in terms of the climax, is not as solid as Ready or Not. Like I said, it would have been better if Dan Stevens would have been the one instead of Catherine Newton's character, who, if he would have gotten bit like earlier in the movie, and he would have like gotten crazier and crazier and went mad with power or whatever by the end when he fully turned into a vampire, and he would have just like went crazy, and that's when he would have became like the main villain of the movie, and Abigail would have been forced to like team up with Melissa Barrera, you know, like the enemy of the enemy. Sorry about the vehicle in the background, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend, you know, that kind of thing. That would have made more sense. And then she would have been like, well, she saved my life from Dan Stevens' father, so, you know, she needs to be let go. That would have made more sense. So yeah, overall, it was a good movie. I liked it. It could have been a great movie with a more solid third act, but as it is, this is a good flick. I liked it. I'd definitely pick it up on Blu-ray. Solid 3 out of 4. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.